So we're back in the shop today. Today we're working on a 2012 RZR 570. This is the non-electric power steering model. So the reason why we're working on this is our front U-joints are pretty well shot. They have a lot of play in them. A lot of side movement, up and down movement, pretty much everything. So those need to be replaced. To get to those, we obviously have to remove the prop shaft or drive shaft. First step we need to do, we need to remove our seats because part of the removal process is getting our center console out and then also undoing a couple bolts on our floor to allow removal. Then there's also a pin that sits basically in the front diff that we have to pop out, and that allows the shaft to slide backwards, and then the slip yoke will slide forward out of that end. Okay, so first things, let's remove the seats. Step 2, we want to disconnect our negative lead on the battery. Even though we're not really working with too much electricity or anything, it's always a good idea to do that. So disconnect your negative lead. Next step, we're going to be taking this wheel off and lifting it. So while it's still on the ground, go ahead and get yourself a 9/16 inch socket. Break these loose. And go ahead and lift up back of the RZR. Also, one thing we can't forget to do, go and take a chalk, since we're lifting the rear wheels off. We're going to chalk these tires. Grab another piece of wood, put it on the front as well, and then lift the back end up. Okay, we got the front tires chalked. Go and lift up the back of your RZR. More clearance you can get, the better, but as long as your suspension is at rest and dropped, you should be fine. So next step, get some jack stands, just so you're supporting the weight instead of your jack. Okay, slide your jack stands in place. Go ahead and finish taking off your tire. Tire's off. Now you got yourself a little seat. I like to just take my lug nuts, put them back on the studs, just so you don't lose them. Also, now's a good time to inspect your brake pads and your rotor. Okay, this next part may be a little tricky, but you have a roll pin right there that we need to hammer out. So I start by using a punch, and if you have the right size punch, you can push it all the way out, but my punch is a little bit too big, so I'm going to start it with this punch. Then I'm going to take just a crappy screwdriver, one of my throwaway screwdrivers, hit it the rest of the way out. I'll try and capture this on camera, but it's pretty tight in here, so we'll see what we can do. So I changed tactics a little bit to get that roll pin out. So I originally was getting it started with a more of like a center punch. Kind of backfired on me because it expanded while I was hitting it which really wedged it in there. So anyway, I'm actually just using some pin punches. The correct size is 5/16 and 5/16 to make it a little bit easier. Instead of coming from the side, I actually noticed there's a hole in the bottom of the skid plate, and it's much easier to orient the drive shaft where it's pointing straight down, and then put your RZR up on some blocks and then hit it from below. Lot more room, you can get the proper angle. So I can't really hold the camera and tap it out, but I have it the majority of the way out now. So just continue that, and we'll pick up once I get the pin out. Okay, I got the roll pin out. That's what it looks like. Do not do what I did and use the wrong tool. I spent most of the day getting this out when just these standard punches that are designed for roll pins would have worked so much better. So moving on, once you have the roll pin out, you can start to slide that drive line back. You can slide it back now off the slip yoke, or you can do it later. We're going to have to remove a couple things before we can actually get it out. Okay, next we have to remove this center console. So it's Torx size 30. It's just a handful of them. They go all the way up and around. So we'll do that next. So we got all the fasteners out. I just wanted to make a point real quick. So you have 3 different types of fasteners. You have 2 of these really long ones, and they have washers on them, and they go right there and right there. Those are Torx 30. Okay, then you have these 2 special ones up in front. They don't have washers, but the head on them is much larger than all these other ones, and the thread's a lot finer as well. These are Torx 27, and they're just the 2 bolts right there and right there. All these other ones along here, along that back side, they were Torx 30, and they have the coarse thread on them. So next we need to remove our shifter. Okay, so to get our shifter off, you can just take a screwdriver and very gently pry in between here. Try not to bend your plastic. This pops off, and in the top it reveals a Torx 25 bolt down there. So you just have to pull that out, Torx 25. This will slip off. Okay, once that's loosened, pop this off. We're ready to remove our center console. To make it a little easier, we're going to shift this into neutral or low, one of the two, just so it's a little bit easier to lift out. We'll set this down somewhere. Don't lose your bolts and washers. I put them in a bag. Okay, and so now we have our drive line a little bit easier to access. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to pull back on the prop shaft so we release it from basically the front diff. I had to put the camera down when I did it, but all I did, I took with the prop shaft in both arms, or both hands, pulled it really hard back, and now we got the slip yoke to release. And so now we're just going to slide this forward and release it from the back end. Okay, and there we go. So the push rivets ended up being kind of difficult to get out, but what I did, I just took my crowbar, basically put it in on both sides and lift it up, and that way you can hopefully reuse these. These aren't expensive, but you know, reuse what we can. So we're going to take off these push rivets. We got this one right there. We got that screw, that screw, that screw, or bolts I should say, and this floor panel should lift up. Okay, so we removed all the push rivets. We removed all the screws going in and around. It's really quite simple. All you have to do is you pull back on your this piece of plastic here, pop this up, pop that side up, and then this whole piece, you just have to move this out of the way, but this whole piece will actually just slide up like that, and that's all the clearance we need. That's going to be perfect to make things just even a little bit easier. We're going to undo these two bolts. These are just a junction for brake lines. These are all braided lines, so when we undo those two bolts, that'll slide out of the way, no problem. Will give us the nice angle we need to let it slide out. So these are Torx size 25. So we're just going to loosen these. And we're just going to take this, kind of push it a little bit out of the way. Okay, the next part of this, we need to remove our primary clutch, which is this one right here. And how we do that is we remove our belt cover. I didn't show that, but it's a series of 10mm screws just all around the outside. You don't have to remove this one, but all the other ones you remove it out. Pull your belt cover off. You may have to lift the back of the RZR up to clear the suspension. But the easiest way to get our primary clutch off is, one, you want to buy your clutch puller. This is an OTC 4975. It basically mimics the same one that Polaris manufactures. That's a little bit cheaper. I think I paid $30 for it online. And then we need to get this bolt off as well. And that bolt is a 5/8, and the easiest way to get this off is with an impact. So you take a 5/8 socket, put your impact on there, and you zip it off. Okay. Don't lose that spacer, kind of a rubber spacer. Okay, then this next part, you're going to take your clutch remover tool. You want to lubricate these threads. You're going to stick it in there and you're going to thread it all the way in. Now I have already pulled this off a little bit earlier, but I will kind of show you how you do it. Basically, you thread this all the way down, and those threads are locking into the clutch, and then the more you thread it, it starts pushing against the crankshaft and kind of extracting that out. So this is already on here loose because I've already popped it, but basically you want to take an impact, or you can take a like a breaker bar or a, some large socket, and keep twisting this to the right. Now if you don't have an impact, you can take like a wood handle or something and go through this cage, kind of through there, and hold it while you do that. But basically you're going to keep turning that to the right, and then it's going to pop off like that. Okay, now's a good time to clean this, and we'll kind of go over that as well, and I'm also replacing the belt on this just because it's been smoked a few times. And just very gently set it down, and now we have our primary clutch out of the way, which should allow our drive shaft to slide out the back. We're now ready to pull our drive line out. I have this back left tire on. We may need to raise this up. I may even need to take this tire off. Not sure yet. But we'll go ahead and try and start pulling it out. Okay, and looks like we have plenty of clearance back here. Okay. And there we go. So now that this is totally out, check your U-joints on both sides if you didn't before. I know that my front ones need to be replaced. These back ones seem to be in really good shape, although it would not be a bad idea to replace them anyway, since we've gone through the trouble of removing this drive line anyway, and these are usually only about $20. So the back ones feel nice and tight. If we look at the fronts, you will see we have all kinds of play in all directions. Okay, so that's how we remove the drive line. My next video will be how we replace the U-joints. Thanks for joining.